February 28, 2026, around 11 p.m. That was the night when the first explosions lit up the skies over the Middle East, triggering a crisis that shook the global oil economy. Joint U.S. and Israeli military strikes inflicted heavy damage inside Iran. Within hours, Tehran responded with a decision whose consequences were felt far beyond the Gulf, even in New Delhi. The Strait of Hormuz, the world's most strategically sensitive maritime choke point, through which millions of barrels of crude oil and large volumes of LNG pass every day, was suddenly closed. Iran asserted control over the narrow waterway and blocked the passage of ships attempting to cross it. This was not merely a naval blockade. It was an economic chokehold aimed directly at nations dependent on Gulf energy. Among them, India stood as one of the most vulnerable. South Block, New Delhi, March 2nd, 2026, morning. An emergency meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security was convened under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Bright sunlight filled the windows outside, but inside the room, the atmosphere was tense. Maps of the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, and the Arabian Sea were spread across the table, alongside reports stating that nearly 80% of India's petroleum and 90% of its natural gas imports travel through this very route. If the passage remained closed, the crisis would extend far beyond fuel shortages. Fertilizer production, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and the entire industrial supply chain faced the risk of severe disruption. During the meeting, Prime Minister Modi made India's position clear. The country would not become part of any military coalition, but it would take every necessary measure to protect its citizens and commercial shipping. It was in this meeting that the foundation of a new mission was laid, an operation that would later be named Operation Urja Suraksha. Yet the operation was built not only on naval strength, but also on quiet, behind-the-scenes diplomacy. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, regarded for decades as one of India's most experienced and discreet strategic minds, initiated confidential back-channel talks with Tehran. These discussions did not take place before television cameras or in public press conferences. They happened inside closed rooms, over encrypted communication channels, and through diplomatic pathways unknown to the public. Doval's objective was straightforward: to secure an understanding with Iran that would allow Indian-flagged commercial vessels to transit safely without participating in any military coalition or transporting coalition military supplies. According to reports, after weeks of discreet negotiations, Tehran informally assured India that Indian vessels would be allowed safe passage, provided they were escorted by the Indian Navy and carried no coalition military cargo. On March 10, 2026, the New York Times reported for the first time that the Indian government was considering options to rescue its commercial vessels stranded near the Strait of Hormuz. By then, an Indian Navy destroyer and a frigate were already deployed in the Gulf of Oman and the Gulf of Aden under Operation Sankalp, a maritime surveillance mission that had been active since 2019. One of those ships, INS Surat, had recently participated in joint exercises with U.S. CENTCOM in Bahrain. But circumstances had changed dramatically. Routine patrols were no longer enough. On March 25, 2026, Operation Urja Suraksha was officially launched. The structure of the operation resembled a carefully planned military thriller, except every moment was real. More than 5 frontline Indian Navy warships, including the guided missile destroyers INS Kochi and INS Chennai, were deployed across the Gulf of Oman and nearby waters. Meanwhile, more than 20 Indian commercial ships waited west of the strait for clearance. The procedure was precise. Once an India-bound tanker completed Iran's verification process inside Iranian waters, it was permitted to leave. At that moment, Indian Navy warships positioned in the Gulf of Oman took over. As soon as the tanker crossed the strait, naval escorts assumed responsibility, providing layered security while accompanying it safely across the Arabian Sea. The mission was far more dangerous than it appeared. Several ships sailed extremely close to Iran's coastline, avoiding official shipping lanes. Some moved toward Chabahar, while others navigated near Pakistani waters, attempting to remain outside the direct observation of the U.S. Navy. Sea mines had reportedly been laid across sections of the maritime routes, and Indian warships guided merchant vessels through these hazardous waters. A single mistake could have destroyed an entire ship, its crew, and its cargo. Behind the strategic maps and shipping statistics were deeply personal human stories. One 28-year-old Indian sailor, stranded aboard a vessel in Iraqi waters for nearly a month, anonymously told an international media outlet that sleepless nights had become routine. Standing alone on the deck, he constantly wondered when the next explosion would occur and how close it would be. Missile strikes near the Iranian coast were audible from his ship, and every blast raised the fear that they might be next. It was a fear shared by countless Indian seafarers, trapped aboard vessels unable either to return home or continue their journeys. An informal group of ministers led by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh coordinated the operation from New Delhi. Officials later stated that India had successfully escorted more commercial vessels through the strait than any other country. Together, these shipments brought back approximately 340 tons of fuel, enough to sustain India's requirements for petrol, diesel, and fertilizers for around 11 days. Simultaneously, domestic production was increased by nearly 40% to reduce the impact of disrupted imports. Priority was given to pharmaceuticals, agriculture, polymers, paints, and metallurgical industries to prevent supply chain failures. One of the operation's first major successes came with the safe arrival of the VLGC Jog Vasant at Kandla port, carrying 42,000 metric tons of LPG. It was more than the successful voyage of a single ship. It demonstrated that the months of quiet diplomacy led by Ajit Doval and his team were producing tangible results. Shortly afterward, another tanker, Pine Gas, also completed its journey safely. Together, the two vessels delivered more than 82,000 tons of LPG to India.
The tension, however, did not disappear with these successes. Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi repeatedly stated that India and other friendly nations would be allowed to move commercial shipping through the strait. At the same time, Jassim Mohammed al-Budaiwi, Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, alleged that Iran was charging commercial vessels for safe passage, an accusation Tehran firmly denied. Meanwhile, two Chinese container ships reportedly attempted to enter the strait, but turned back midway. To many observers, this became evidence that while much of the world remained hesitant to risk the dangerous waters, Indian commercial vessels continued operating under the protection of the Indian Navy. The operation also sparked intense debate among strategic analysts. Some dismissed it as little more than diplomatic signaling, arguing that 5 or 6 warships could never challenge a military force the size of US CENTCOM. According to them, the mission was capable of deterring pirates or isolated security threats, but not enforcing freedom of navigation during a major regional blockade. They argued that the real contest remained one between Washington and Tehran, with India occupying only a marginal position. Government officials, however, viewed the operation very differently. They described Operation Urja Suraksha as one of the strongest demonstrations of India's policy of strategic autonomy. India neither joined any military coalition nor openly confronted any major power. Instead, it quietly created its own path, one that protected Indian shipping while preserving diplomatic relations with both Iran and Western countries. Even today, Operation Urja Suraksha remains a story whose complete truth may never be fully documented. Its most important elements, the back-channel negotiations, the confidential understandings, and the conversations held in secrecy, are unlikely ever to appear in official records. What is publicly known are the visible outcomes, the names of the ships, the cargo they carried, and the dates they safely reached Indian ports. What happened behind those voyages? The phone calls made by Ajit Doval, the unwritten understanding between New Delhi and Tehran, may remain as deep and mysterious as the sea itself. Perhaps that was the operation's greatest success. Its true strength lay in its silence.